just for record keeping, can you please state your name and the date?
The date today,
Mm-hmm.
Linda Landreth, May 29th, did we say? 1920 or 2025.
Thank you.
Oops.
And I would also like to thank you for accepting this interview. This is so exciting. I just want to give a little overview of what I was researching. I wanted to find the relevance of fiber arts because I personally really do like the arts, but I wanted to find historical prevalence of the fiber arts in Virginia. And I know historically there has been almost a purposeful devaluing of fiber arts, as sewing and making clothes are so integral to life. Like, we need clothes. So historically there have been during the Industrial Revolution there have been a lot of sweatshops and a lot of ways to manufacture clothes for cheaply. But meanwhile, they've been doing that. But in order to manufacture them at such a cheap price, they have been like delegitimizing the art by saying things like it's a woman's job, it's a woman's work, and saying that it's innate to women, and saying things that to them were evidence to say that this can be produced for cheaply. So, but as we know now, manufacturing isn't really prevalent in the United States anymore. It's been outsourced to other countries, but there has been a resurgence of the fiber arts, but more from women who have chosen to partake in it. And from that, I have observed that people have been like pricing their works at a higher rate. They've been saying like sewing takes time, it's a skill that people develop, and there's a more appreciation, and it's being applied in ways that people would like to apply them to. So that's a bit, I wanted to observe that phenomenon. And I thought you were the perfect subject, as you've been, it's almost like a historical, like you pause this town, and I wanted to see how your outlook on the transformation of fiber arts throughout history, or just here in Loudoun. So that's my...
Okay.
Yeah. But I do have several questions. That was just like context I wanted to give.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to say?
No, let's start with your questions, and then... Now, you're recording?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me explain up front. I had to have radiation treatments for a tumor, so it's affected my speech.
Mm-hmm.
So I slur. So if you don't understand something, just ask me and I'll repeat myself.
Of course. Thank you so much. First, I wanted to ask, how old is this building?
1883.
1883?
And it actually started life as a dry goods store, which is where ladies came to get fabric and millinery goods and ribbons and bows. Then in the 1930s, it was converted to a general merchandise store, i.e. a grocery store, and they sold, all manner of things in addition to groceries, but that's when it was converted. Then, probably 10, 12 years ago, maybe a little bit more than that, the community changed substantially. The old ones, had passed on or moved away, and younger people moved in. And the younger people want to go to Trader Joe's and Harris Teeter and Whole Foods. They want a 50-foot deli with ready-to-serve everything. And so they don't use these little stores. So in order to survive, when I came out here 45 years ago, there were probably 15 or more little stores. Every community, every crossroads had a little country store. The last time I counted, I think there were only 4 or 5 of us left. The ones that have survived have had to become a specialty shop, wine and cheese, or, antiques, whatever, collectibles. I've tried to maintain just a basic line of groceries for people in a last minute need to throw together a pasta salad or something. And then I've kind of changed it back to a fiber studio for myself and for my friends who produce wool things.
Thank you. I was going to ask, because I did do a little bit of research back from an article written in 1995 by the Washington Post. You did mention that the store used to be a store for, did you say textile for women to shop?
Yeah, it was called a dry goods store, and that was, and in fact, down at the post office, it's too late now, but the man who grew up in this store and the woman who was postmaster for many, many years were husband and wife. When he was the family that converted the dry goods store to a general merchandise store. So he got rid of the oak cases, the glass oak cases. And when she needed some extra workspace, he took a section of counter that was in the basement and put it down at the post office. So when you go into the post office in the work area, there's a long oak counter with deep drawers and brass pulls. That was where the bolts of fabric were stored. So, and the light fixture in the lobby of the post office came out of this store. So there's still a little bit of it, and the foundation has some of the oak and plate glass cases that came out of this store. When this modern stuff, that like that freezer was brought in, used in 1940, the blue ribbon bread, those shelves and those things were brought in the, in the 30s and the 40s.
I wanted to ask if you knew any information about the previous business, like, did you know what was popular, like what types of ribbons people would buy or what people would shop for?
Not really. That's kind of, by the time this was converted to a dry goods store, or when it was a dry goods store, machine goods were available. Mm-hmm. So there were handmade, there was actually wool. Wool was commonplace in Waterford. There were woolen mills. Mm-hmm. There was a fuller's mill as you came into the village now on just remnants. The foundation are there. There were a couple of wool processing mills going out of the village on Milltown Road. All of those powered by the creek behind us. But by the time this store was built, machine goods were available. So they would buy fabric, and the prints of those periods, you can look at, museum pieces and see they were calicos and, floral prints and usually sort of basic colors. I would guess this was a Quaker community, so probably nothing very flamboyant.
Okay, thank you.
But young girls always want ribbons,
Yeah.
Ribbons and bows.
In store, what is popular now?
Dryer balls.
Really?
In the food line, I carry, cold drinks and snacks for the guys who work in the area. So, I sell a lot of Dorito chips. I sell a lot of lamb sausage, which I produce from my sheep. Are probably the most, popular food items. But in the woolen, in my wool products, my dryer balls. Oh, there it goes.
In the same article from the Washington Post, it did mention that you did hire women before.
Mm-hmm.
What type of women did you hire? And
when my partner died 42 years ago, I was still commuting into Washington in order to. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on.
Oh no! Are you kidding? Are you gonna put it on him?
No, you're gonna do it.
Oh, great! So
you're gonna give him lots of treats when you do it.
So he can hate me.
Thing. Come on, let's go.
So
She's busy.
where was I in that thought?
You were commuting to Washington?
Oh, so I had the good fortune of having a couple of neighbors in the community who were retired, and they took turns keeping the store because I was still commuting into Washington in order to pay the mortgage. And so a retired man and a young mother took turns running the store. Then I got a phone call from a young woman who had worked full-time for the county, had taken time off for maternity leave, didn't want to go back to work full-time and leave her baby, and her sister-in-law said, "Why don't you go talk to Linda? Maybe she could use some help." She started to work for me when her daughter was just a baby and continued to work for me until her daughter started middle school. Went to grade school at Waterford, and Patty Hutchison continued to work for me all those years. And then when I retired, the understanding was always when her daughter started middle school, then she needed to get a real job. I said, "Oh, you mean one with decent salary and benefits?" And so then she started to work part-time, took a while off, and then started to work part-time someplace else. And when I retired, I started to run the store full-time.
Thank you. How long have you been spinning wool for? How and when did you learn?
I can tell you 2000 was when I started spinning. A neighbor had a spinning wheel that she kind of had moved on and wasn't, for some reason, spinning didn't appeal to her the way she thought it would. And so she offered to sell me her wheel, and that was my first spinning wheel. I had I started with 2 sheep. A friend of mine in Maryland had a flock of sheep, and our biggest problem with sheep are domestic dogs running at large. And her area was starting to suburbanize, and some neighbors' dogs got into her flock and did a lot of damage. So she thought, the handwriting's on the wall. And she got rid of her sheep, except she had 2 favorites, a mother and daughter, that she asked me, would I consider giving them a home. So I started with 2 sheep, 2 white Corriedales, and now I have 38 sheep. And I've bred over the years for color because I like hand spinning natural colors.
What drives you to continue to weave?
To continue to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh. I've had this conversation so many times with people. When I find out they have family wheels, they don't really know where they are, somebody's attic or whatever, and I scold them about how when a tree is cut, people think it's dead. No, wood is a living thing, and it needs to be nourished, or it dries out. And wheels are put together in sections, and they'll dry out and contract. Wood contracts and expands, and you need to oil it or handle it, or just the oil from the wool in your hands feeds it. That's one thing. You need to keep it healthy. But more importantly than that, there's something about spinning. Now, when my family homesteaded in Nebraska, machine goods were available. That was the late 1890s. And so there was no family wheel that made its way west with my family. So I didn't grow up with this art. But what I found is that there's such a connection with past generations of women. Even on a new wheel, this wheel's probably, maybe 20 years old. I inherited it from a friend. But when you spin, there's something about the sound and the rhythm that's very relaxing. I had a couple of sisters come in here years ago, and one of them was walking around asking all kinds of questions. The other, and I was spinning, and at some point I realized the other sister was standing here and hadn't moved, and I stopped and started to say, "Do you have any question?" And she was like slack-jawed, and her eyes were sort of, and she said, "How much would a spinning wheel cost?" So I launched into, different this and different that, and the price range of that. And without hesitating, she said, "I think I should have bought a spinning wheel instead of spending all the money on meditation workshops." That's what it does to you, the sound, the rhythm. But even a deeper thing is there's just such a connection to past generations of women, thinking about how it was a necessity to produce, clothe their families, to outfit their homes, and how old in art and how essential in art it is and has been. And that's, I think, why I continue. Part of it is just it's so relaxing. It's just a connection that I can't quite explain, but it also is a way to pass that on and hope that people I help start spinning will be as infected as I am and continue the art.
What is the modern perception of spinning? I'm asking this both from like a stereotypical sense and also because you brought it up in the way, like the interpersonal sense, like when people actually see it in person.
Generally, people are fascinated by it. I find it very, very interesting with children because I demonstrate spinning in, Montessori schools and school kids that come by. Boys are fascinated, and men are fascinated with the moving parts. I have to watch the little boys carefully because, the hooks and the spokes and, they always want to reach and grab. Little girls stand back, as do women, and watch and are a little bit mesmerized by it. And then invariably when I stop and ask if they have any questions, the little girls always ask, "Where did Snow White prick her finger?" I mean, little girls are so observant and they pay attention to details. The spinning wheel that Snow White pricked her finger on is a different style of wheel. It's not a treadle wheel. It's a walking wheel that you drive the wheel with your finger, with your hand, and you spin off the tip of what looks like a knitting needle that sticks out. Do you spin?
No,
Well, the revolution of that needle, you spin off the tip, and that's what puts the twist in the unspun fiber. And then you reverse the wheel to wind it up on the spindle. But little girls, where did Snow White prick her finger? As they get older, and I always try to engage men with the engineering of the wheel, how it works. The foot pedal, powers the wheel through the footman. The wheel powers the flyer through the drive band. The flyer revolves, and that puts the twist in the unspun fiber. There's a brake on the bobbin that makes the bobbin spin slower than the flyer, and that creates a draw. And so the flyer is what puts twist in the unspun fiber, and then the bobbin draws it up. And the tension between the drive band and the brake is what determines the thickness of the diameter of the yarn. And if you mess with those and get them adjusted just right, it will draft the wool out of your hand at the same diameter. And I usually cheat. But see, when what's called drafting, see how it comes out at the same thickness? If I want it thicker, then I'll adjust the ratio between the drive band and the break so that it draws it up more slowly, puts a little more twist in, and that makes a thicker yarn, or vice versa. If I want to draw it up faster, you reverse it. And that determines how much, when I draft it, pulls out of the unspun fiber. It's magical. These treadle wheels, people think about the walking wheel as being ancient and this being more modern. Actually, treadle wheels were widely distributed throughout Northern Europe in the 14th century. So it's very old. But, there's always a better mousetrap. A fella in New Zealand separated the brake from the drive band. It used to be just a double band that drove back the bobbin. And the knob on the front of the wheel adjusted the whole thing back and forth. Ashford separated the two to give you more control. And now there's a flyer that automatically goes back and forth like a sewing machine bob, and it's called a woolly winder. So there's always new inventions, and they're still building. There are people designing and building wheels. There are a few of us throughout the country, around the world. I like Ashfords. They're a real workhorse. They're very durable. And I'm a product of the 60s, where a lot of my friends went into the Peace Corps. And when I started spinning, my friends said, "Oh, you wouldn't believe where we would encounter Ashford." Their motto, their slogan is "The world spins on an Ashford." And they said, "You would find Ashfords in the jungles of South America, or in the desert, in the Sahara Desert, and the Bedouin tents." And so I just like Ashfords.
I wanted to ask, have you observed any differences in the perception of arts or woolen products between the people who live here and tourists?
Between the people who live here and tourists?
Yes.
Not really. There are a few people in the village that are more committed, less so than there used to be, but there's a commitment to traditional craft here that isn't as strong as it used to be, but there's still some. I have things I've made that have been gifted all over the world because of people that live in Waterford. A neighbor of mine, her daughter married a German fellow, so all of her grandkids and the in-laws over there have Waterford wool items. A friend of mine who's from England, when she goes home, she takes gifts back to family and friends in England. But I would say mostly I sell now to tourists. But I have a neighbor outside the village that gives my dryer balls as gifts every Christmas, every wedding, I had a young man, a teacher, down the street that came in, gosh, it was a long time ago now, but he said, "Do you make anything for babies?" He said he's a grade school teacher, middle school teacher, and one of his colleagues, there was a baby shower, and he said, "I need something for a baby shower," and of course they would mostly be women. And I said, "Oh gosh, I really don't." Well, I used to have the dryer balls in a basket here, and he was walking around looking, and he said, she'll do a lot of laundry. And so he bought a set of the dryer balls. He couldn't wait to come in the next Monday after this baby shower to tell me. He said, Linda, I was the hit of the shower. Everybody thought I was so clever. So it's, I sell mostly to tourists, who want to take gifts home. But at Christmas time at the fair, what people who come to the fair buy a lot of my things. And then for holidays, people, so it's, I probably sell more to visitors than people locally, but it might be more. It's probably pretty even.
How do you think the value of fine arts has changed here in Waterford?
How the value of it has changed?
You did mention how it's gotten less, I wouldn't say maybe less passionate, but people have.
When I came to Waterford, and I've been here 45 years, 45 years, there were a disproportionate number of artists and craftspeople. Thank you. The Waterford quilters were organized here. The Waterford weavers were organized here. There were the Waterford Players, the Waterford Chorus, the Waterford Book Club. This was a really thriving community, and a lot of I don't know if you know the author Geraldine Brooks and Tony Horwitz lived here for a time. He probably wrote Confederates in the Attic when they lived here. Larry McMurtry wrote Dances with Wolves. He lived here. Jake and Suzanne Page. Jake wrote for the Washington Post. Suzanne was a photographer who wrote a wonderful book on the Navajo people and a similarly wonderful book about the Hopi people. She spent a lot of time in the Southwest. So there were a lot of artists and craftspeople who lived here when I came out. As Loudoun County became suburbanized and the prices of everything, of real estate, rose, and the older people, there were potters, and this was an artistic community. It was a product of the 60s. There were people my age when I came out here. I'm 82. I was 40. As those people moved away, and it was priced out of reach for beginning artists, you have to be successful and have a following to make a living as an artist. And so it really isn't, Loudoun County isn't really within reach of beginning artists. And those of us who've been around, I'm one of the longtime residents of Waterford now. There's a handful of us that came about the same time. They're the same age. But all the artists and craftspeople are gone. And there's just not the same commitment, because that's what I would like. Waterford is a National Historic Landmark. We have a traditional craft fair, village fair in October. I would like to see the buildings that the foundation owns used as artist studios, used as, like the 2nd Street School is a living history for the first black school in the county. And every grade school kid in Loudoun County comes to visit that school. Their class comes before they get out of grade school. A living history. That's what I wish all of Waterford could be, but we don't have a wealthy benefactor. We need a Rockefeller or to sponsor that. It takes an extraordinary amount of money to do that kind of thing. The foundation has a staff to pay. The fair is very expensive endeavor to present every year. Just maintenance of buildings is expensive. And so, and it takes a real commitment. You know, you're interested in art. Takes money. And there's just not, and man, with this administration, there's no art anywhere. I mean, I don't know how much time you spend on social media, but check out the boss and what he has to say about art in this administration. I don't know if you heard, I can't say his name, and he's my generation, before his concert in London, had a lot to say about the death of art and music and under this administration. So, you know, the funding's been cut off. Look what's happened to the Kennedy Center. Look what's happening to the threats on nonprofits. The foundation is a non-profit. The funding's going to be severely cut, and our economy, I think, is going to tank. And that's when you see less money spent on crafted items. People aren't, I mean, we enjoy a level in Loudoun County, enjoy a level of affluence that will still enable some people to make money, but people are more inclined, and particularly the younger generation is more inclined to spend money on experiences rather than things. And so rather than investing in a beautiful piece of furniture, reproduction furniture, they'll go to a winery and spend the evening.
Or travel.
Or travel, yeah. Which is fine, too, depending on where you go. I mean, we need to see America. But it's a different level of appreciation. And your generation, my hopes lie with your generation, because there's that, I don't even know what generation they call themselves, but you know, that 30-year-old group.
That could be a lot of people.
Yeah, but it's a different mindset.
Millennials?
And it's a more self-centered, what I want to do, me first. The younger generation, in my mind, don't disappoint me, are more environmentally tuned in. They're more racially accepting. They're more gender fluid and just open-minded. I mean, at least that's what I see. I mean, I was connected with 4-H for a long time. It was different kind of kids. Polite, cooperative, team players, empathetic. And that's the burden I put on your generation. Because somewhere my generation got off course the way we raised kids to be more tuned into themselves. And I'm afraid that's what got us to where we are now, and it's your generation's going to have to dig yourself out of the hole. That hadn't got much to do with fiber art, but
No, I want to comment.
philosophy of life.
Yeah, it's an important conversation to have. I wish I could comment on it more, but I have to focus on interviewing.
Exactly. Go to the next question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
How has industrialization affected your business, and if it has at all?
It really hasn't affected me. Suburbanization has done more to change the nature of these little businesses. There's a tendency among people these days to buy too much stuff, and so they go to stores like Walmart and Kohl's and I don't know, even in the names of the stores, to buy, well, those mittens, for example, are made with recycled sweaters, We used to bale that stuff up and ship it to China, and then China decided they didn't want our junk anymore. And so some clever person designed a pattern for mittens that used recycled sweaters. Those are almost all acrylic. People think that taking care of wool is too hard. You know, you gotta be too careful, and then it fell. Well, we don't have the patience anymore, so we buy synthetics, petrochemical products. And that's what industrialization has done, is moved us away from natural fibers into synthetics. Because they're easier to take care of and they're cheap. And so, you know, like I say, we enjoy a level of affluence in Loudoun County where people still will spend, and my products are priced not what they should be. I mean, I sell my thing because it's what I do all day. If I had a booth in the DuPont Circle, craft, you know, farmer's market, I could probably sell my things for twice what I sell them for out here. But I think it's going to make a difference. I'm good friends with the fair chairman. We expect a smaller turnout at the fair, and I'm just wondering what the sales will be with the economy doing the weird stuff it's doing. So we'll see. Next question.
The next question actually has to do with the way you answered the first question. It was, how has the increasing prevalence of synthetic material changed any factors of your craft?
Oh, well, I just think it's changed our whole consumption. Yeah, I try when I sell wool products, and I'm not, you know, completely opposed to synthetics. I don't dye my wool, and so the color in my hats comes from commercially dyed product. So much of our yarn now comes from Turkey. I try to use a U.S. yarn product for the color, but they're synthetics. Sometimes I'll get wool, mohair, whatever, but it's almost impossible to avoid synthetics anymore. But I have wool in all of my products, and it's a primary ingredient in all of my products because I'm promoting sheep and wool. But we want something we can throw in the washing machine and throw in the dryer. I try to tell people when I sell wool products, I try to instruct people how to wash wool, how to care for wool, so that it's not such a frightening prospect.
Thank you. The next question is, many other companies, specifically those who sell clothes, have outsourced their manufacturing to other nations or just shut down completely. And how have you been able to run such a small business?
Well, that's a real easy question to answer. Tell your folks, pay their income taxes, because I get a retirement check. I'm a retired federal employee. So every month I get a retirement check. And that's what pays the bills.
Okay.
The proceeds from this business don't begin to cover the expense of keeping this storefront open. I'm doing it for, it's my contribution to history. This store has been here since 1883. Sarah runs the corner store down at that, I don't know if you visited the corner store.
I was going to visit right after, if it's still open.
I'm not sure she's open.
Oh, okay. Maybe another day.
Yeah, she's usually open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. She's turned it into an antique and collectibles. You know, she sells towels and pottery and candles and incense and furniture. And now she's added a food line. And so they serve a lunch She makes called espresso. You know, she's like the local Starbucks for the weekend. My neighbors refer, my older neighbors refer, that's the bougie store, and I'm the real store. But I wouldn't be able to keep this store open if I weren't retired.
As a business owner in a historical district, do you ever face any stereotypes, both current and potentially historical, and how have they affected your perception of customers or your business?
Okay, start that over again.
As a business owner in a historical district, do you ever face any stereotypes, both current and historical, and how have they affected your perception of customers or your business?
Another one of the many reasons why I keep the store open and as unchanged as it is when people come through that door and they stop and they look around, they draw a deep breath, and they start to reminisce about visits to their grandparents. There was a store, I remember there was a store like this. It smells old, it looks old, and it draws out memories. And that's not changed. In all the years I've been here, that's not changed. And it's one of the stronger reasons that I'm still here. I want people, and it's changed dramatically. I mean, when we took it over, we still cut meat and got milk and bread deliveries, and had family tabs and ran home deliveries. It was a really vibrant grocery store. Those days are long gone. But it's still reminiscent of a store that used to be. I keep the old equipment even though it takes up space, and I could probably use that space to display other people's merchandise. You know, make it more like this corner store, I guess. But I just don't want to do that because I want this place to look like it would, at least remind people of what it would have been like. Because we're losing that so rapidly. Now we tear down the old and build the new. Strip out, I mean, even the houses in Waterford, the new people coming out, the younger people, they got the interior. They need an open floor plan, and they need a kitchen island with a granite countertop. I mean, we're losing the look of an 18th century Quaker village, and I want there to be a reminder.
More going into the topic, as I explained before, I wanted to really delve into the interactions of like women in fiber arts, and in that subject, what does women's work, that phrase, what does that mean to you?
You're talking to a 1960s feminist, my dear. I think it's women's work to keep the future generations on course. I think it's being recorded, isn't it?
I'm sorry.
Women are the creators, the peacemakers, the consensus builders, the teachers. I really think it's up to women to keep civilization on course, to pass on not just the old crafts, but just to pass on how you're supposed to live life. What's it all? There was a popular song way before you wouldn't even know. What's it all about, Alfie, was the theme song. What's the meaning of life? It's to pass on what you know, to help the next generation make their way through, you know, the hard times. Is that too?
No, it's just way more interesting than I could have imagined.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's the way I was raised, I guess.
As a woman running a business, have you ever been discouraged?
Not really. Not really.
I think
as a small. I think as a small business owner. I wish I were younger. And had more energy. And had more energy like I had 20 years ago. 20 years ago. Because there are all kinds of possibilities. And with fiber. I'd really like. I'm one of the founders of Waterford County sheep producers. And it isn't near the vibrant. It isn't near the vibrant it used to be. But there are things in the marketplace now that I think offer opportunities for sheep. And I wish I were young. I wish I were energy to do it. To drag people kicking into new products. We tend to get stuck. You know, you get older, and sometimes you kind of get stuck. And I think I must be a younger thinker. A lot of people my age. Because I'm going to try and introduce new products. But physically, I need help. But I don't think I haven't. I think I face the same problems that others do. You know, businesses do. You know, capitalization is always, maintenance. You have to do it. You have to do it. I'm kind of doing it on my own. And there's never enough money to replace the roof, and you know. And I should be on. I should have a social media presence, and I should have an active Instagram account. I can't even learn how to use my phone. I have to call. I get stuck, and she said, "Oh, Linda, you need to post every day." Well, you know, she carries her phone out when she doesn't, and she'll post an exquisite photo of the spider web, a new flower starting to unfurl. Now she tells me, you know, I've deleted to get just that one good. But I haven't posted. I haven't posted on my Instagram. Another friend said I haven't posted on it for months. I don't follow people. I'm here 6 days a week. If you want to, come on out. Or what was that? Game show. Come on down.
I just have two more questions that I would like to ask.
Okay. I keep getting off on these.
No, it's okay. It's okay. They're so.
I tell people. You didn't come in here for a sermon, but it's free.
How much of a conversation play in running your business?
Oh, it's absolutely essential. You know, people could go to Walmart and get a hat or gloves or whatever. But they love it. Everybody loves the story. And so to see the sheep. I mean, this has got to be the most photographed and to see the sheep, and then to see me spinning wool from those sheep, or see me knitting or crocheting from those sheep, to be able to tell you the names of a lot of my sheep. People, we're living in such a fast-paced culture that we don't take time to slow down and connect. People don't join organizations anymore. I mean, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, churches, Lions Club. People, we've isolated ourselves with our screens. And so when you go someplace where somebody actually smiles and says hello, where are you from? Where are you from? And sometimes it may be a little too. I'll hear people with an interesting accent and say, oh, where are you from? Oh, well, I'm from Wrestling. No, I mean originally. And then sometimes I in this day and age that might be a little off-putting. Generally people. Then they open up. Then I get that, and because I've never traveled. I never will. I never will at this stage. But I get to explore through other people's experiences. And so I mean, I don't care if people come in here and buy anything. If they've got a story to tell, you know.
My last question. I kind of touched on. What changes do you hope to see in weaving crafts? In craft or weaving, either one. For one thing, I'd like to rearrange the store so that I could set up a loom. See that change in weaving. Actually, my friend, the fair chairman, instigated a wonderful craft school project at the foundation. When I first came out here, they used to have spinning classes and weaving classes, and they discontinued that. Got rid of all the equipment. Very recently, just in the last couple of years, they started traditional crafts. And so they teach weaving, they teach spinning, they teach dyeing, floor cloth painting, and they do it usually a few hours or a day long class. Most of them are just a few hours, but it's enough to introduce you. And hopefully draw some people in and generate some interest in traditional crafts. And I've already told you, I would love to see Waterford turn into a traditional craft village that's committed to preserving traditional crafts. I don't expect to live to see that. Now, people are more interested in incense and scented candles, and that's not what I want. And that's not what I want. Jewelry that you hang the bead on it. No, I would love to see blacksmiths, weavers. I mean, there were a lot of weavers. This was a lot of wool manufacturing in Waterford. So that's my hope for the future. I just hope Waterford does not become so suburbanized that it loses its identity. First, I would like to thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yes.
Oh, you're welcome.
Just so I can.
Okay.
But I do have more questions.
Okay.
So thank you so much. For your interview. It was very lovely.
You're very welcome. Like I said, you're